In this section, you're going to learn how to dance with your camera. What does that mean, Brown, you idiot? Composition is not a camera function, it's a photographer function. It's about you moving your body, and how you move your body and where you move your body to is the main thing that affects your composition. You're the composer. You are the one who is making everything come together. It is your composition. I would say exposure plays a part in that too, because how bright or dark a picture is, it's all part of the composition. You want it dark and moody or bright and happy. These are all the things to look at. The great thing is, as you dance with your camera, you can start to liberate interesting things from boring surroundings. Look at this picture, for example. These two little boats, they're obviously interesting, aren't they? But it's kind of boring, busy. Where are we looking? What's this all about? I don't know. But by moving the body, by moving, going somewhere else, thinking differently, you can suddenly make that exact same location and that exact same subject become something quiet and peaceful, a bit like Mozart in a dream. The other thing, of course, is creating something from a different point of view, something that's a little bit different, maybe a bit edgy. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a beautiful picture, but what we do want to do with our composition is to capture someone's attention. We want them to look at it for a moment. This picture, for example, very, very grey, dull, flat light. So we haven't got exciting light to fall back on, but what we have got is composition. And some people might go, oh, the light's awful. This is the plane wreck in Iceland on a windswept black sand beach. It's one of my favourite locations to take people on a workshop. The light is flat and grey. Look at that flat grey sky coming in behind. But by putting it in an unexpected place within the viewfinder, making it small, what have we created? We have created something that's cold and lonely and a little bit edgy because it's a little bit unexpected. It isn't obvious. This is the key, not being obvious, because when you see something the same way you've seen it over and over and over and over again, your brain kind of shuts down and goes, boring, seen it all before. When you learn to dance with your camera, these things change. We're going to move the sun in the sky. We're going to raise and lower horizons. We're going to hide unwanted objects. All of it. Let's go dance with our cameras. An astonishing 80% of online courses are abandoned before completion. I'm proud to say that my courses are almost the other way around, with more than 70% of my students seeing it right through to the end. So why do so many people give up on something they obviously want to do? One reason is that many courses are just too long, leading to overwhelm. Some have 20, 30, 40 hours of lessons, which on the surface might appear to be great value, but do you really want to wade through all that when you could be confident and competent in half that time? I'm not just an award-winning photographer. I've also trained as a teacher. Lessons, notes and exercises are designed to suit every learning style and are delivered in the right sequence to make sense and work seamlessly. That's why it's critical you complete the course in the order it was delivered, because if you skip around, you won't be doing my masterclass in photography. You'll be doing your own edited version, which won't be as effective. You're investing in me to be your guide and mentor, so please do it my way, because I know it works. Photography isn't as complex as some make out, but it is a skill. It's a bit of knowledge and a lot of practice. You don't get to be a great footballer by watching a few videos. Sooner or later, you have to actually get onto a pitch and kick a ball. A lot. Think how much practice a musician does in order to make beautiful music. The camera is your instrument. First, you must learn how to play it, then how to make music with it. So there are downloadable notes and exercises for you to practice and gain vital experience. These exercises are where you get to practice with your instrument. You can take this course with almost any camera you choose, because cameras don't take pictures. You make pictures by creatively using your camera. And to make serious progress, I want you to commit 5 hours a week. That's only a Saturday or Sunday morning, or an hour a day, Monday to Friday. The more time you put into actually doing photography, the better results you're going to get. Quicker too. You love taking pictures, right? Well, this is a great excuse to make time for it. Composition is a you function. It's a dance that you do with your camera. It is not a camera function at all. It depends on your observational skills about looking at the entire picture, not just the subject. And when you do that, you can move the elements of a picture around all over the place, because you can then consider where to position your camera to get an interesting, pleasing composition. Joe thought carefully about how to compose this shot, because if he hadn't, I'd have a tree growing out of my shoulder up here. Look, that's a very small camera movement, isn't it? He's moved the camera by about that much in space, and it's grown a tree out of my shoulder. Composition is this dance. It's movements of down and up and left and right and diagonally, and sometimes you need to twist left and right and up and down, and you need to do both at the same time. And remember to look at the entire picture, not just the subject. It's this dance that you do, and you can move anything, any element within your composition once you've learnt how to do it. So let's go and do a dance class, and I'll show you what I mean. Here we've got some ingredients. The most scruffy of them is my grubby old car parked there. Let's take a picture of my grubby old car and see if we can make it interesting. What are the ingredients? Well, we've got a tree, we've got a bit of blue going on in the sky, we've got the beach huts, we've got a bit of green grass going on. The horizon is okay, there's a few little buildings and huts, and we might want to move that, but the thing we're definitely going to want to move is that rather unpleasant blue bin that is somewhere in this area here. We don't want that in our shot, do we? So let's have a look through my camera, and then you can see how I dance, how I move around, how I combine those twists, those ups and downs and lefts and rights and bending the knees and all that kind of stuff, and do the dance. Let's get a shot framed up. There we are. So first off, that very unpleasant and annoying blue bin. How are we going to lose that? It's really simple. It's a straightforward move to my right, taking the camera with us, and look at the bin. It's disappearing, it's disappearing, it's disappearing, and boom, bin gone, dealt with. What about the horizon? It's running right through the rear window of the car. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying we can do other things with it. We can move the horizon. If we just lift the camera up and do a downward tilt, watch what happens. The horizon will come above the car. Let's move it above the car. So as we lift the camera and tilt it down, the horizon is climbing, and look, we got the horizon above the car. Now that's not particularly nice, and it's also had the effect of cutting off the top of the tree. That doesn't look good, does it? So let's try putting the horizon below the car, shall we? Let's get it down. Let's try and make it less noticeable. It's just a straightforward lower the camera. The horizon is dropping. We're back behind the rear window again. Let's get it lower. We got the top of the tree back in shot, and as I come lower still to about here, there we go. I would say our horizon is in a pretty good place, really. The thing I don't really like is the tree. It's sort of growing out of the car, just like it was growing out of the side of my head and off my shoulder earlier on. So let's move the tree, shall we? Let's get rid of that tree. This is going to be a move to the right, physically with the body, and twist the camera to the left. So excuse the ungainly position. Let's see. As I move to the right and twist the camera very subtly to the left. Sorry for the jerk. Look, the tree has now cleared the side of the car. That's much better, isn't it? But we're starting to lose beach huts. So what do we need to do now? Really simple. It's a straightforward twist to the right, and that moves the car and everything to the left. There. You see how much better that looks? It's a much more interesting shot than this one when we first started rolling that bit of video. And you can play with it. If we want to put that horizon lower still, it's just a straightforward bending of the knees, getting lower and lower. I think it's better without the horizon. Now we got a leaf growing out of the, you know, the wing of the car. The edge of the tree is. If we get rid of that, it's just a question of moving to the right a little more and twisting as we go to me, I would say that is probably about the best we're going to get. We've got a straightforward 1, 2, 3 going through our shot. You see how easy that is. It is a simple little dance of the body, and we have moved the horizon up and down. We've hidden a bin. We've moved a tree. But that's all we've done. We've made no adjustments to the camera whatsoever. We haven't changed any settings. The only setting we've changed is ourselves. We've done that little dance of moving around. You can practice this stuff anywhere as well. Try it in your living room. But composition is a dance. It's a photographer function. And it's controlled by arms and legs and hands and knees and feet. When learning something new, we all want a sense of certainty that we're going in the right direction, that we're not going to completely stuff up. Please let that go, particularly when it comes to the rules of composition. Rules are great because they give us that sense of certainty, but don't forget, composition is a creative thing and you are the creator. They aren't really rules, there are guidelines, but so many people get so hung up about the rules, the different spirals and all the rest of it. We're going to go through just a couple here and look at the theory of them and ask a few pertinent questions about them. But the thing to remember is that rules is more what you would call guidelines than actual rules. So please, please, please do not get hung up about them. The most famous is probably the rule of thirds. If you divide the viewfinder into 3 horizontal and 3 vertical sections and mark lines across those thirds, by placing points of interest along or near those orange lines, especially where they meet, it makes a pleasing composition. And I'm not saying it doesn't. It often does, but don't feel compelled to force this to happen. When you look at these shots here with that grid on, you can see how it applies to those images. And if you start mentally applying that grid to images you see online, to movies, to all that good stuff, it's surprising how often you'll notice it when looking for it. The rule of diagonals is all about positioning points of interest so that they have a diagonal relationship with each other within the frame. So when you look at the first shot on the left of Maria, okay, there's a blurry foreground and background, but those shapes and colours are creating this diagonal relationship across the frame through Maria. The second shot is self-explanatory. It's just a tilt on the camera, but it's a kind of cool tilt. It's a bit of a wonky angle. The boat and the ship, the cheeses. All of these things you can see very clearly have a diagonal component running through the composition. The last one, I didn't even bother to put the orange line on there. I think it's self-explanatory. What about leading lines? This is another one which is very popular, and again it's something that works. If you look for it, you will see it all over the place. A leading line leads your viewer to the subject or through the image. So the stone wall in the first one is leading us out across the lake. The stone breakwater is leading us to the sunrise. The path in the snow leading us to the building. The little path at night to the little house. The fibres on this lotus weaver's loom are leading us back to her hands and then up to her. You see, it's all pretty self-explanatory stuff. But wait a moment, what about that chair? We've got leading lines coming in from the corners because of the regularity of the building leading to the chair. But didn't we just see that had a diagonal in it as well? Then, of course, we've got frame in a frame. This is where you can frame a subject within a frame. For example, if you look behind me, there's a door frame. And if I were to just kind of move a little bit like that, look, I am framed within a frame. I'm framed within this section here between the cupboard and the upright in the apartment behind me. I am framed in a frame. You're looking at a frame in a frame composition, and all these images you're looking at here, you can see how this works. We frame a subject by framing something within the frame of the composition. If you look at the last shot, the one of the mosque, look, we've got a frame, we're framing the mosque within those pillars, but then also we've got another frame going on deep inside. You see that little human shape raising his hands like that, all backlit? So Which rule is best? There are so many of these rules. There are Fibonacci or Fibonacci spirals, also called golden spirals. There are so many different rules, but remember, they're not rules, they're guides, they're ideas, and it's really useful to study them, but don't feel compelled to stick to them necessarily. So we've got the mosque framed by the pillars, and we've got the guy framed by the archway. We've also got a rule of thirds going on, haven't we? Look where those pillars are, roughly in relation to those third lines. Look, even that guy, he's on one of those third lines. Remember, position points of interest on or near those lines. Oh no, we've got a leading line going on in the same shot, haven't we? Look, it's generated as you get those coming up from the corners. We're running across the lake. The arrows are kind of showing you where these leading lines are pushing you into the center, to the mosque, to the frame in a frame, which is also on a rule of thirds. And then on top of that, we've also got a decisive moment going on. That moment when he throws his arms in the air. Is your brain exploding? This is why you mustn't worry about rules too much. Understand them and look at them. The thing is with rules, you can change what you're saying about a subject, but using the same rule. This is important that you understand. This is the same cheese and it's the same rule, but three very different pictures. Do we want to pick up some cheese, or do we want to move our body a little bit lower? And you can see those hands in the background, and now we're kind of saying artisan cheese, but it's still the rule of thirds. Or do we want to say artisan cheese with the hands, or do we want to just change the camera angle a little bit, still use the rule of thirds and say, look at this beautiful cheese? The thing is, there's a lot of guff talked about rules as well. They say that the subject should fill the frame and never be in the middle. Well, look at the shot of the flower with the green tick. That's fulfilling the rules rather nicely, isn't it? It's not fully in the middle and it is filling the frame. But therefore, all the other pictures on this page are wrong. They say do not put the horizon in the middle. Well, our shot of the sunset there with the little house and the horizon down low, that's perfect. All the others are obviously bad, wicked and wrong, and I deserve to go to jail for taking all three of them. Rules are more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules, and there's a plague of nonsense spoken about them. So please, let's not get too hung up on these rules. Study them, look at them, understand them. The interesting thing is, when you shoot a picture and you arrange the elements of that image around the viewfinder in a way that you think looks pleasing, then when you go back and really study it, you'll probably find that one rule or another will apply to what you did. It's much more interesting to look at it from that angle rather than going out and going, right, okay, I want to shoot a picture of this lake. I need to apply the rule of thirds. I need to put this lake on a third. You'll probably end up with an awful picture. Break the rules by all means. The question you must ask yourself is, am I breaking the rule and coming up with an interesting, evocative, exciting, eye-catching image? It's not just about breaking rules for the sake of breaking a rule. And it's not about abiding by rules because the rules say you must. Look at them, understand them, see where they apply to things you have taken, because they will help you with your composition. But don't feel you'll go to prison if you don't use them. There are so many different ways in which you can compose a picture. Look, we've got a guy down the end there sitting on a little bench in that little pool of light, all backlit, and it looks gorgeous. How are we going to pose it? Well, in this one we're going to mostly explore rule of thirds, but I think you'll see there are so many ways in which you can do things, and these are not rules, they're guides. Usually you don't even notice that you've used a rule until you look at the picture afterwards. I certainly don't. Let me put the video on my camera here and let's have a look down the end there. I'm using a longish lens. Now look, if we've got that guy right in the middle of the composition, it's not quite so good, is it? If we move him onto one of these thirds down there, it's kind of better, but what about all that empty space over here? It doesn't work. Trying to impose a rule doesn't always work, but composition and focal length are best friends. So if we were to keep him on the third, and just slowly zoom that in a bit, you see now it is getting better. Now it's kind of nice, isn't it? I quite like that as a composition. I think it works very well indeed. I'll take this picture in a moment. But you don't have to put someone on a compositional rule. By the way, if we put him on the other third, then it just kind of looks a bit odd, a bit messy. Look at all the components. Remember to look all the way around the viewfinder. I'm sorry, my finger's all blurry, isn't it? But look all the way around and see where the elements are. I would rather give him a little bit more space, not necessarily put him exactly on a third, but also put him pretty low in the frame. I'm putting him in the middle there because I think that looks better. Let's take a couple of versions of that photo and see which one works the best. So let's start with the one that I had. What's my exposure? I'm going to take it down just a touch because I don't want to burn out the highlights, because there's some strong highlights. Another thing with this is, look, if we were to do, let's do my in the middle, down the bottom, bit of negative space. That's that empty space all around him. That looks kind of nice. Because also, look, if we were to impose the rule of thirds with him on the right-hand third, we've got so many more bright highlights in front of him, he starts to disappear. If we do the zoomed right in with him on a third, that isn't bad. It looks kind of nice. I hope I can keep the camera still. That's not bad, I have to say. For a rule of thirds composition, that is pretty good. The thing is, there isn't a right and there isn't a wrong. There's only what you like. The key is to look all the way around the viewfinder and be aware of all the different elements of the composition. Is there another way we could compose this using the rule of thirds in inverted commas? I'm going to put him on the top third on the right. Now, that just looks rubbish, doesn't it? But it's very easy to begin with to try and impose rules. We'll put him on the other third. On the other side, I think that looks rubbish too. To me, the best place for him is not quite on a third, but pretty low in the composition. You know what? As the light has changed and there's all these bright highlights everywhere, I think it is better. I'm going to make the shot darker. I'm waffling and going off into exposure here, but this is what you have to do. Down on a lower right third, I think is pretty good, but I think the earlier, more negative space, a bit more space around him. Where's the trunk of that tree which I used earlier? I think that, to me, with him in the middle. Why is that? It's because the light, that little pool of light that he's sitting in, which will be gone in a moment because the sun moves so quickly through the sky, but that little pool of light that he's sitting in is making him stand out in amongst the trees. Light, composition, focal length, they're all best friends. But that was a little exploration into the rule of thirds by placing elements of interest on or along those third lines. It can make a pleasing composition, but don't think you have to impose it. So we've got a great spot here. Look, we've got trees, we've got a bit of a bridge, bit of a river, lovely old house, and we've got that strange sort of pointy shaped building in the garden going on there as well. So it's always really tempting to just turn and take a photo of it. So I would just sort of turn around here and line up a shot, and yeah, look at that. It's not bad with those trees, but I think it could be an awful lot better because there's no real sort of dynamism to that shot. There's no real sort of a journey. What we need is to add something that will take the viewer on that journey. And we've got a great leading line right here. Come and have a look. We've got the edge of the river and this brick wall, which leads all the way up the river to the bridge and then across to the house. So all you have to do is find the position where you can really take advantage of that leading line. And I think it's about here. Because my thoughts are, we'll run the bricks up the side of the picture. That will be the edge of the shot and it will lead us back to the trees and the house. So here we go. That's roughly what I'm seeing. That's not bad, is it? That's not bad already. But I think we can make this leading line down here much stronger. And it's kind of not just this, it's the river too. The whole thing is taking us up here and to the house and the sky beyond. But I think we can make it stronger just by getting lower down. So I'm going to bend my knees. Watch. Look, you see how that shot is changing. We're bringing more of that line to play. I don't think I want to go too low. Well, it's not bad, even down here. But I'm going to settle for just slightly higher at about this height. Focus on the house. And I'm going to cut that tree in half. Maybe zoom in a tiny bit. Here we go. I think we're in a good place for this shot now. Tilt it up, let's have a bit more sky. Nice. Now, what about the exposure? Light meter says I'm overdoing it a little bit, and that's just a fluke. I think that's probably about right. What would happen if we put it where the light meter said yes? Because we do want lots of depth of field, so I'm going to make the aperture smaller to give us more depth of field. And that's where the light meter says it's correct. Not bad, but I'm just looking at that histogram. I don't think it would hurt to go a bit brighter because I want to see into the shadows. I don't want it to be too dark. Even though the sky's not terribly exciting, look at this. Look, here we go. We're starting to brighten it up. This is a classic case of the U-shaped histogram, this shot. Right, get the house nicely sharp and zoom it in a bit. I'm fiddling. But this is the thing with composition. You should always take your time because composition is really important. Now let's compare those two shots. The first one's kind of boring, but look in the second one, we're taking our viewer on that journey up the river, to the bridge, to the house and to the sky beyond. There is a big and dramatic difference just by adding that leading line. But nonetheless, this shot isn't as exciting as I feel it could be. There's still a little something missing, isn't there? We've gone from a kind of boring picture to a much more dynamic one, but it needs a little lift, a little extra, and that little extra is going to be light. So we're going to come back here in another time when we look at light and do a little comparison. Using a diagonal in a composition doesn't necessarily mean having something running diagonally through the frame. It's an implied relationship. So right now we've got Carl down here on his bike, me up here. Everything's all over one side, isn't it? Now there are all these vertical and horizontal lines going on and that makes it messy. But if I come and stand over here and lean against the railing, now there is a diagonal relationship between Carl and I running on through the shot. It's an implied diagonal. It's not actually a real twisty, slopey thing going on like that. It can be used in many different ways. You can find diagonals in different places, and we're going to go and look for a couple more in a moment. But the thing is with the diagonal compositional tool is it doesn't have to be a hard line. It can be implied. You can often find diagonals when looking around in busy little spots like this. Look, an escaping lobster come out of one of the lobster pots. Look at those straight lines that Lobby is on. We could probably use them. Let's get the exposure a little bit better. Here we go. That looks about right. I like the light. But look, we could use those straight lines against this little splash of diagonal colour going on in the corner. Let's see what we can do. I'm going to back off my focal length a bit, make it a bit wider. I want to make that splash of diagonal red in the corner as small as possible against that because it's in gorgeous light and it will make it stand out a lot more. I think that works really rather well. You could of course get even more graphic with it and put all the slats of the palette on a diagonal too. Never be afraid to experiment. Let's see whether or not that would work. So I'm twisting it. We've still got a little diagonal splash of colour in the corner and we've got those other lines running through the shot too. But because the light and the red are so strong, it's going to make us look where we want someone to look. Which one do you prefer? Personally, I prefer the first one, with that little diagonal line of red in the corner against all the straight verticals. To me, that is what makes that one work. Keeping a shot nice and simple is always a really good idea. Shannon, in yellow, against the blue wall, standing in the sun, looking cool. Look at the windows either side. These are the interesting parts. Now you could kind of do an inverted V. It's almost like two diagonals. By using the two windows, look at this. What sort of settings do we need? Well, we don't need any depth of field, do we? Because it's really simple. There's no depth of field to worry about. Let's get the exposure spot on. I think that looks good to me. Histogram looks happy. So let's carefully compose this with both windows. Sneak that focal length around, get it in the right place. Focus on Shannon. Here we go. Make sure I've got those windows in. I don't want any of that like dark wood railing thing. So very carefully compose it. Remember to look all the way around the frame, and you see we've got this sort of inverted V. There's almost like two diagonals coming from corner to corner down to the bottom. It's like an upside down triangle, isn't it? It is a cool shot, but we could simplify that still further and kind of make Shannon smaller, make it a quieter, possibly more dramatic shot by having only a single diagonal. Look, we sneak that focal length in a bit. I'm going to move, we're going to lose the window on the right. We don't want to get too much of that white from the edge. Just this way, I'm going to sneak in the focal length a bit more. See how I'm zooming a tiny bit? Focal length and composition, they're in love. Now we got a very strong and obvious diagonal relationship. Make sure I don't crop, you see the white at the top of the window? We don't want to crop that off. Up a bit, there we go. Here we go, I think that's good. Make sure the camera's level, it's focused on Shannon. Don't want to get any white on the right, click. You see, you've got to be really careful not to miss things out around the corner of the viewfinder. I think Shannon looks a bit small. I'm going to see if I can get a bit more Shannon in there. We'll still have a good, strong diagonal, but look, you see, that's a nicer amount of Shannon. I'm not sure we can do it. Probably can if I shorten the zoom a bit and just go to the left a little more. There. Make sure I haven't cropped any white off the top. See how important it is to look all around the viewfinder. That works. I like that. That's a pretty cool shot, isn't it? Possibly a little bit tight on the white at the top, but hey ho. So these diagonal things, they do work very well as a composition, but always remember, don't try and impose a diagonal where one doesn't exist. Very often you will notice any of these rules of composition only after you've taken the picture. The key is to look at a shot, look all around the viewfinder and try and find what works. As in, we did the two windows with Shannon at the bottom and then kind of simplified it by having just one window with that diagonal on it. Let's take a little look at using foreground in a composition, but remember, these things kind of mix up. Let's have a look. We're out in the woods. It's a beautiful morning for a walk in the woods. Look at the trees, the light coming through them. The smell, the sounds are gorgeous, but remember, you're removing those sounds and smells when you take a still image, so you've got to somehow make it a little bit eye-catching, a little bit different. Let me show you what I mean. Now, I'm going to look over here and just pop my camera onto video mode for a moment, because I want to show you, looking through the trees from here, here we go. Even if I put the lens wide, yes, it's nice, it's pretty cool, it's a pretty sort of a scene. But if we were to include a bit of foreground, maybe with this tabletop, it will improve. Watch as I lower the camera. As we come down onto this table and start to include it, here it comes. Now look, you see, now with these lines running through the picture, we've got this bit of foreground down here on the table, and it is leading you into the picture and onto those trees. I wonder if I come back a bit, can I get a bit more treetop? Here we go. So I think you'll agree that looks considerably better. Let me take those shots and then we'll quickly compare them. Look, so here is what we had in the first place. I'm going to brighten it up just a touch, I think. Here we go. And let's just take a picture looking through the trees. It's all right. Now if I take the same shot, we're going to come down low. We're going to use this little piece of tabletop tilt the camera up. I'm going to use a slightly smaller aperture because I want to make sure I've got plenty of depth of field. There we go, it's nice and sharp front to back. Here we are, and that is considerably more dramatic, isn't it? Now, yes, we got the sun coming through the trees, got a beautiful little starburst going on there. We're going to talk more about starburst later on in the course, how you achieve that. But it is a far more dramatic effect just because we've included some foreground and some leading lines. This is why rules of composition are not really rules, they're guidelines. And very often you don't even notice which rule you have applied to a picture until you look at it afterwards. Let's go find another one. We've got the little house up on the top there and the trees. It's a very wintry, dull day sort of a scene. I kind of like things like that. But if I was to just take a picture of the house, because it's very easy to concentrate on the subject and not the surroundings, let me increase my exposure. I'm going to argue with my light meter a bit and watch that histogram as I do it. There we go. Just brightened it up. Now, if I was just to take a picture of the house and the trees against the sky, something like that, yeah, it's okay, but it really is just a little bit boring, isn't it? But if we were to include some foreground by using this little sort of rill of water where it's coming out of the tide pool, then we can suddenly add a whole new dimension and a lot more depth to the picture. I'm going to get low. Very often, it's just a question of moving around. That really is all composition is. So checking my histogram, I'm actually going to reduce it though. I think the light changed a fraction there. This is one other thing, of course, you have to watch out for. Let's get our shot lined up, and I'm changing my zoom a bit, as you saw. There we go. Now, suddenly, we have got a whole new sort of depth and dimension. Instead of it being a house all on its own against the sky, we've given it a sense of place and added a whole load of depth into the shot just by adding that little bit of water. This little bit down here, it grabs the eye and then takes you back into the picture. Let's go and find another. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a little bit of bird song going on because spring is just starting. We've got some lovely evening light going across the valley in front of me. And it is really rather gorgeous being here. Now, of course, we want to record things like that, don't we? And we bring up the camera, look down into the valley. There's a little farm down there and just kind of line up a shot, something like that, and take it. Because the light's rather lovely and the valley's rather lovely, but the picture, it's just a little bit dull and flat and boring. And that whole experience of being here is missing because we've lost the sound of the bird song. We've lost the feeling of the slightly chill early spring air. We need to do something more to help the viewer through this picture to make it a bit more dynamic and stop it from just being, well, ordinary. Well, how about if we use some of the little twigs, some of the branches on this tree above me and include those into the shot, use them as foreground. I'm just going to move back a couple of paces. Bring out the camera. Look, we've got a twig already. Just shorten that focal length a touch. We don't want too much in there. Just going to put them in the corners and at the top. I'm going to focus on the twigs. I think we'll be all right for depth of field if I make the aperture just that little bit smaller. Let's go to about f9. That's going to help. Shutter speed's still good. So, whoops, focus on the twigs. There we are. And let's compare them. So here's the one with the twigs. That is so much better, isn't it, than the first one, where it's just flat and dull and really not particularly interesting. That little tiny bit of foreground has helped immensely. But there's so much more that we can do. What about if we added a little bit more to it? For example, if we were to start adding more foreground. Either side of me, we've got these trees. We've got this little bench going on down here. How about if we used that as foreground, moved our body, moved further back so we can frame the whole valley using those? Have them in the foreground. I'm going to move back all the way up here a bit. How does that look? Well, that looks a lot better, doesn't it? However, it looks a little dark, doesn't it? So I'm just going to see if I can sneak that exposure up a tiny bit more. I might be going too far at that, but we'll see. I'm also going to just zoom the lens in a bit to help bring the farmhouse closer and put those trees right on the edge of our composition. I'm going to focus on the bench. I'm going to give it a bit more depth of field. Let's go to about f11, f13. The shutter speed's got very slow, so let's increase the ISO and bring that shutter speed back up, somewhere around there. 500 ISO is plenty. Hold that composition, get it all straight, put the bench at the bottom, click. I kind of like that. It looks so much better, doesn't it? I don't like that little bit of white to the right of the tree on the right. Take it again. I must have moved something while I was fiddling with ISO. You have to look all around the viewfinder, be very, very careful with your composition. That is better. We don't want that little line there. Like that. There we go. And now we've got the shot that we wanted. You see how much more dynamic it is if we just flick back. Look, that was the one with the white. Look, here's the one with the twigs. And here's the one with no foreground at all. And it is just so flat and one-dimensional. Just by adding a little bit of foreground, framing up the shot a little bit more carefully, we can make it a whole world better. 2 trees and a bench, and we've just brought a whole landscape far more to life. Foreground, it's a great way to lead your viewer into your pictures.